Our last panel of the day is about Kosovar refugees in the actual communities. So now we've taken the story from the military and diplomatic context to the overseas experience, to them on what were called sustainment sites, so our very long stays on military bases, and now they are integrating into communities. The bad news is that one of our speakers called me and was sick this morning. So Dr. Jennifer Heineman cannot be here with us, but she has published articles and books on both refugees and Kosovars. So those are listed in the program, and I encourage you all to read her research. And now it's my honor to introduce, like I did last night, Fisnik Preniqi. Today, Fisnik Preniqi is the Assistant Deputy Minister in British Columbia, the government of British Columbia, but in 1999, he worked as a settlement support worker, and he was also a member of the Kosovar Albanian Diaspora, and he's going to be moderating this panel.
Thank you, Krenara. And I didn't quite pay attention to the agenda originally, but now I can see how very nicely it's been flowing throughout the day from one part of the story to the next one to the third part in the bases that I didn't really know much about until today. So that was very good. And I can see that you're all alert, which is really nice to see at a conference by this time of the day. Most people are either gone or ready to go, pretty much. So, but this has been a very interesting day, and I'm happy to see that you're with us and alert. So that's great. I will take the lead of the earlier presenters, and I'll say a few words about my own experience. In '99, I got involved in settlement work quite by accident. I phoned Immigration Canada when I heard that the government had decided to bring refugees, and I asked whether they needed any help because I can speak Albanian and I can speak English. So I thought that would be a useful skill to have. They said, yes, we have these military bases set up in the East and you can go there, and that'd be great for you to help us. I wasn't willing to travel, but I asked whether I can help locally. And that's where they directed me to the Immigrant Services Society. They said Immigration Canada is not directly involved in the settlement of refugees. So that was kind of a new thing to me, and probably a lot of people don't know the way things are set up with non-government organizations being more directly involved in the settlement. So I approached ISS and again offered my skills as a untrained interpreter, but they offered me a job as a settlement worker instead. And of course, that's, as many of you have probably thought at one or more times in your life, and I've said it many times since, are you sure I can do this work? But very clearly, it became very clear soon after that, yes, that is kind of a very good job for someone that can bridge the gap between the language and the culture of the people that are coming into the country and the local infrastructure, the government, the culture, the expectations. And so I spent some very good time working in immigrant services, helping people from the very first days of finding an apartment, finding a place to live, explaining the process of rental agreements, very basic things like that, bank accounts, taxes. Being a finance person, that was the easier area for me to work in, but perhaps not as easy to explain to people that are not from that field. Working, getting jobs, lining people up to other services in employment, healthcare, liaising with the healthcare providers locally, with a clinic that was mentioned earlier for people who had experienced trauma. And I basically got to meet pretty much, if not everyone, almost every one of the refugees that came to Vancouver and British Columbia more broadly, because Immigrant Services Society was also one of the central agencies that helped other smaller agencies that were in the region. I did get involved later on with Dr. Jennifer Heineman and another researcher of the at the time Simon Fraser University in looking at the regionalization of settlement of refugees, looking at what happens when you send people to smaller locations versus larger locations. I think that was touched on a little bit earlier with the question of where do people want to move, whether you can tell them to go to a certain location or would they prefer to stay in, you know, Toronto, Montreal, big centers. I have not been in the field of settlement of refugees since, but I hope our panel will address that and see how things have developed since 25 years ago. With that, I will introduce our first member of the panel. I have to refer to this. Okay, Chris Friesen of the Immigrant Services Society of BC. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Fisnik. What a unique opportunity. And again, a shout out to the organizers. Just such an amazing opportunity to spend time with all of you over this past 2 days. And we don't get these opportunities to reflect on a specific humanitarian movement. And this one was so unique in so many different ways. I also want to shout out to Mario Cala. Raise your hand. He refused to come to the front with us, but Mario for 35 years was the CEO of COSTI, Canada's largest immigrant serving agency here in Toronto, and also and that Easter weekend in 1999 had that call that pushed us forward in our unique way. Reflecting on today and the different panels, what came to mind was that there were so distinct modules, time frame, and then you end up in settlement, Canada's settlement sector, where our work spans years. And so your interventions, either overseas, in this case, in internment sites, and then finally destiny community, that's where we come in. Canada's settlement sector, over 75 years old, upwards of 850 immigrant and refugee serving agencies across Canada, delivering Canada's immigrant integration framework, which was initiated in the late 70s. Language program, first language settlement services, volunteer, the sponsorship agreement holder, and so forth. My presentation, briefly, 3 phases. I want to give you a little bit more context leading up to that Easter weekend. And then share with you some of the perspectives of Canada's settlement sector in that post-arrival planning phase. That's where we come in, Canada's settlement sector. And then what have we learned? And I want to give you a sense of where we've come over the last 25 years, because it's been a remarkable journey. Mario, Fariborz, and I, and a few other colleagues of the country have dedicated our entire careers to this work, and collectively probably have over 100 years of experience, just the 3 of us. Now I really feel old. So what was happening? Just very briefly, 1985, Canada invested in refugee reception centers across Canada. That infrastructure was being built, 1985, first in Regina and across the country. 1 year before the Operation Parasol was the introduction of the Resettlement Assistance Program. This is Canada's national humanitarian program for resettled refugees. This was the downloading from the Government of Canada to the settlement sector to administer on behalf of the government, IRCC, the initial support, housing, facilitating the income support, and other things for government-assisted refugees. The other thing just to mention is that because the sector has been around for 75 plus years, our agencies were involved in the Ismailis. My agency was involved in 1972. 1,200 came over a 2.5-month period. We were involved in the Vietnamese boat people. And so this collective knowledge that really defines the unique contribution of non-governmental organizations in the Canadian context and globally is so unique than what we have learned over our careers and talking to our European and US and other colleagues. So it's with that the Easter weekend arrives. And Rick Herringer, whose name's popped up before, yes, we also got a call advising us of this new movement. We were sensing that something was going to happen, but didn't know from that point. So here we are, Easter weekend, and I've given you all that background intentionally to kind of paint a picture. When we got that call and began talking with Rick and colleagues at IRCC, what was going to be our role? Because up until that time, we have had a significant role in the post-arrival phase, defining that. It was made clear that military bases for those containment sites would be utilized. This was against what we were suggesting. And again, political decisions, but I want to kind of, I want to push back a little bit around the dynamics. We felt that fundamentally that it required sooner we could get them into communities across the country using pre-existing infrastructure, the better off they would be. So contrary to the kids, who I think a lot of them loved the military bases, and I recall the ice cream machine, you could self-serve, and the cafeteria, it was an artificial life. And as you mentioned earlier, they stayed a little bit long. And that made it harder for us to figure out, okay, so now you've been to these military bases. Anybody interested in coming across the other side of the country to Vancouver, right? And the challenges. It made us realize we had to do a 2-tier orientation program. It made us figure out some of those volunteers, interpreters, they were coming from our agencies closer to where those military bases. And so it was a challenge around that. And so that final destination into local communities across the country was challenging. The repatriation, I understand the context, and it's easier to look backwards. Bad idea. Those individuals that chose to go back because they're teenagers were upset that they had been, they've left their country, their friends back home. We downstream got so many emails, calls, etc., that they made the wrong decision. And it would have, hindsight, it would have been better to have used, land them in the country and let them determine whether they want to go back or not government facilitating. Again, military bases, never used since. Repatriation, Government of Canada, never used since. Yes, encouraged. Of course, the lack of mental health supports, we've heard about that. The lack of pre-departure orientation, no time for that. We've mentioned around the trauma pieces. Again, downstream. We got it, we heard it, sexual violence, torture, and so forth, and we're working in local communities to do that. Unique, that has not happened since, is that Operation Parasol, all of us came together again after it, and we had a formal evaluation. And it was the first time that the Government of Canada created a contingency plan for large subsequent humanitarian movements. So when Mario, Fariborz, and I, 2015, Operation Syrian Refugee, we were waving this banner or this binder saying, hey, we've already sorted this out, but again, so many changes within IRCC, they didn't realize that back in 1999 that they had this binder. So here we are in the future now. Thank you. So we've now had subsequent movements, the Syrians, the Afghans, we've got the Ukrainians under the QET visa, and lots of lessons learned as a result of this. I've mentioned, again, no further use in the military bases, no further use in repatriation. What gives me, I think, hope is that we've now developed trauma-informed programming and services across the country. We now have settlement case management programming for at-risk refugee families that allows a worker to work with a family for up to 18 months in a concerted, supportive way. We now have the infrastructure of the settlement sector has grown substantively across the country. The use of technology has allowed us now to deliver, in the case of the Afghan Special Initiative, programming in the hotels in Toronto as they were arriving, child minding, youth programming through iPads and so forth. So that has been a huge impact on the sector. Lastly, it's like a heart monitor, an ECG for us in the settlement sector. Every time there's a political decision, we ramp up, then we ramp down, ramp up, down, up, down. So over 30 years, we've been at the forefront. We've had the advantage of working with every new and emerging humanitarian population. And what is encouraging is that we now have IRCC investing in a national humanitarian secretariat that will provide small resources to keep an infrastructure for future subsequent arrivals, which will inevitably in this world occur. So that is something that I think also has evolved out of our lessons learned, our perspective of Operation Parasol. So in conclusion, please wrap up. Perfect. Operation Parasol has had an enduring role and impact on Canada's settlement sector in many unique ways, but also of the government, of IRCC, and how we, in reshaping the post-arrival phase of large-scale humanitarian resettlement movements. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kristen, thank you for paying attention to the notes. That's great. Our next another veteran from the settlement world from the Western Canada.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Amazing experience. I have a PowerPoint. Oh, it works. Good. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for invitation. Thank you for celebrating the 25th anniversary of Kosovo project. I like actually Kosovo project, not Parasol project. Anyway, I think my name is Fariborz Birjandian, and 38 years ago at this time, November 1st, and actually I left Iran as an Iranian with my family, my wife, 2 kids, and my mother. We literally walked 21 days to escape Iran and go to Pakistan and become a refugee. And that is how my life as a refugee started. I'm a former refugee, and I'm very glad to be in Canada. And since then, 37 years, that has been my life. Breathing refugee, thinking refugee, living refugee, everything is about refugees. Canada refugee protection and resettlement is an amazing story. It's a very positive story. I can make a business case out of it, how much benefit Canada has actually received by doing the kind of work Canada has done around the refugees. There are around the world, there are 1951 convention about refugee protection and 1967, but out of all those 200 some countries in the world, only 23 countries actually, like Canada, sponsor and resettle refugees. So to me, what Canada does in the area of refugees is very precious. We have to do everything possible to make it work, to make it sure that Canadian support refugee initiative. And I think Canadian largely do that. I mean, I've been involved with the refugee settlement for past 37 years. And refugees, as you know, the number of immigration, 10% goes to humanitarian, so refugees are coming. What makes the Kosovar or Parasol project more significant? Because it's a mass resettlement, it's a large number of people coming. But every year we get about 35, 40,000 refugees, some sponsored by Government of Canada and many sponsored by private sponsorship agreement holders that they come to Canada. So this is actually for past kind of 1975 with the start of Vietnamese refugees coming to Canada, that we have mass resettlement project in Canada. And Canada, we have a lot to teach, to share with other countries. And I look at the number of similar projects like a Syrian project, Afghan project, which I was actually the co-chair of the national project. 45,000 people came during the COVID. And again, Chris leading the Ukrainian with almost 250,000 Ukrainian coming. So this is something we have to do it right. So today we are hearing about the government, how they plan and how they did it. To us as a practitioner, I think about the day that a political decision is made till 5 years later. What is the settlement and integration outcome of these people? Because if we don't produce their positive result, naturally, Canadian public would not support it and the government obviously to follow. So it is really upon us as a people involved with the refugee and immigration to make it work. And there's a science behind it. And that's what I'm trying to actually today to talk very briefly about. And okay. So you saw there's a lot of the mass settlement, resettlement has its own psychic, has its own psychology, and create its own environment. And that's what I think I wanted to maybe do a scan, environmental scan of what happens really when we have that situation. So we do obviously these decisions are made when a big conflict happens. I mean, go from Vietnam, after the war, Syrian, Kosovar, Yazidis, and all those groups. It is politically driven. I mean, Mr. Van Kassel today, she said that he got a call from minister, said 5,000 are coming, go for it. They don't ask anybody's opinion. I was the co-chair of Afghan resettlement. When the minister announced that 40,000 people are coming, they asked me actually co-lead the whole initiative. I had a meeting with the Minister Fraser, and I told him, I said, you know, we just were looking at the challenges. Housing, I identify as a big challenge. And I told the minister, do you realize that 40,000 people, at least we need 10,000 affordable housing, and we don't have none? He said, yes, he knows that, but they are coming anyway. Go and make it happen. So these are the realities of, is a political decision, is driven politically, and actually, and also is promoted as a national initiative. And then elevated public engagement, obviously refugees. I mean, I remember we had a situation that everybody wanted a Kosovo refugee. And we didn't have enough refugee to give it to people in Alberta so they would be satisfied. I'm sure some of you relate to that. And also a higher elevation of the media attention. And that creates a lot of risk, different level of risk for government, for NGOs, for partners involved as well. And also the other risk that we have is the risk assessment is not done well. Because government does their own thing and define their success, then the partners define their own success, and us in a sector, in a community, we define it differently. So I think one of the things we have to do is, from the sense of project management, we have to have a comprehensive package from the day that the political decision is made till 2 years after people arrive. Because at the end of the day, the people are coming to a neighborhood. They are going to rent a house. They're going to go find a job. They're going to become your neighbor. They're going to be your classmate or your co-worker. So I think one of the things we've been trying to promote with the government, let's make sure the thinking process to design that, it is a comprehensive and has continuum of services till the people actually settle, even when till they become a citizen of Canada. So these are some of the characteristics that I think, I'm sure some of you relate to that and you hear some of the comment around that. And the challenges that we have with the mass resettlement is because usually there is not time to really do a good planning. Because this minister make a decision, announces made, everybody get excited, and that calmness and wisdom that we need to actually look at the details disappears. So we start making decisions that may not be the best decision. And then the other challenge, we have political influence by all levels of government. Cities get involved, provinces get involved. It's a good thing they get involved, but sometimes it becomes really problematic, and I could give you some of the examples that I don't have to do that. So it becomes political. So the mayors come up, they want to make a point, a political point. The party is going to become a political point. It has nothing really to do with the good project management, but then it adds to the whole dynamic of the project. And a special interest group comes in. I mean, we had Afghan refugees coming here. We have Kosovo. Again, I don't want to go there, but you know there were a different dynamic with different communities in Canada. In respect to your even Kosovo resettlement in Canada, with Afghan, we had the same thing. So we had to manage that as well. And the capacity suddenly increased. $150 million comes in. There's not really a good time or not wisdom. How are we going to spend it? Is that wise to spend it this way or that way? And also ambiguity in leadership and accountability. These are the challenges that this mass project. The reason I raised that here for us to think, because we are going to get engaged again, trust me. We are going to have thousands of people. As we speak, we are resettling Rohingyas. You don't get a lot of media attention with that. And Uyghurs are coming, the Chinese Muslim are coming, so just be aware of that. And also the risk management. We need a comprehensive risk management. And we don't do that well, and I think we should get better than to do that. It all actually helps to increase the settlement and integration outcome. This is what I think the thinking process, like designing Audi. When somebody designs Audi or BMW, they don't think about just designing a car. They are thinking about how this car is going to look like or to perform in 15 years. And this is how I'm trying to promote that in my work with IRCC and others. Successes, we've always been successful. All the settlement eventually been successful. Some with some more challenges, more expensive, a little bit delay, but overall we had successes. If you read the media, the Afghan refugees went to England, still they are in some of the hotels. We resettled 45,000 Afghan in Canada till March last year, and really amazing work. Even Australians are surprised as how things are happening in Canada. So it is a successful, but we don't have indicator for success. Because as I said in the beginning, the success is defined differently with different stakeholders. Government define it as, okay, we brought these people, we took it to the, through immigration process, and it is done. But the reality is not done. They need to become an active participant citizen. And that is where we have to define success. And how we bring people, how we deal with them overseas, how we resettle them initially, actually greatly impact the outcome of settlement integration. So, and also some recommendation I have, we need, as my colleague Chris said, we need a contingency plan because we are good at it. We're going to be doing it again in Canada. I don't think that is going to go away. Trust me, because I remember when Kosovo happened, people thought, okay, Canada's not going to get involved, but we had another 10 mass resettlement in Canada. Again, we have to define the task. We have to define the task. What is exactly what we want to do? And engage the expertise. Because it is a political decision. Sometimes they don't have enough time to really look at it, to say who needs to be at the table and what kind of expertise do we need. And I think we are getting better than that, but I want to make sure we remind people that we need the expertise from, even when the minister make the decision, I suggest to them that they should actually bring some people about housing, transportation, mental health to talk about that. Because the decisions we made, that's fantastic. But the next step has to be made very wisely and right. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. And obviously, engage resettlement community from the beginning. Again, there was mentioned 450 staff. We got 44 agency across the country. Actually, that's what they do. They resettle refugee. They are the experts. They are the one that actually the world-class resettlement system we have in Canada, which I'm very proud of that. And also develop this operation manual that everybody could sing from the same song sheet, actually. that when we do that, and my hope, again, that's what we did with both the program recently with Afghan and the Ukrainian, we actually develop a national vision. So everybody could see what is the plan nationally and what is their role. Everybody could get involved, but in a different timing. So I think these are the things that could really make us to do a better job when it comes to really to develop, to manage a mass migration. And then I want to say that what Chris was saying, that there is a program that we call initial settlement, that the outcome-based program. That means refugees come in Canada, in the shortest period of time, they should be able to move into a community, to a neighborhood, and function on their own with limited support. That's what the whole outcome statement is in that program. So I think we need to make sure that we do that piece right. Because if people are moved to a neighborhood, to a community, to a school, and they are not ready or prepared, then I think that's going to impact the public opinion, which I'm very concerned of. And I think a lot of Canadians are involved. Trust me, we got 136 organizations and community that actually actively they sponsor refugees. That is very unique program in the world. You don't have in any other countries the way we're doing in Canada. So I just wanted to repeat what I said in the beginning. Refugee resettlement in Canada has been a success. Refugees make the best citizen. Refugees, look at the Vietnamese refugees with all the barriers that they have when they came to Canada and see how they are doing today. Your own community, I mean, last night we witnessed some of the testimonial by people, my God, amazing human beings that they are calling themselves Canadian citizens, and we should be very proud of them. Thank you.
That was great. I can tell that these guys have done this before. Lots of wisdom and very well presented. Thank you. We have the microphones going around with questions. One in the back there.
Yeah, I'll say something nice about you, Fariborz. A couple of comments. One, going back to your observation, Fisnik, about how difficult it is to settle refugees in smaller communities. And we heard that last night, the Moncton, example. And this has been an issue for IRCC and for us in the settlement community, because the refugees have typically, well, immigrants in general typically have settled in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Now it's much broader than that. But what they realized in studying this was that people will settle, of course, first of all, wherever there are family and friends, then the social cultural supports. And so Canada decided to experiment with the Syrian refugees to see if we could settle them in smaller communities. So they actually funded resettlement centers in smaller communities in 2016. Example, Peterborough and farming community, Chatham. But they did the right analysis, again, in understanding why people settle where they do. Typically, if we settle someone in Sault Ste. Marie, they take the next bus to Toronto. So the reason being, again, the social supports. So what they did different was, instead of sending a family to Chatham, they sent 6 or 7 families to start with. And that really seemed to work. Those families in Peterborough and Chatham and some of the other smaller communities are still there because they had at least each other to support, and then it grew from there. So it's that kind of analysis that sometimes makes a big difference in our field as settlement workers. The other thing that didn't come up that I think is very important, especially as Chris was saying, that the these initiatives, you know, your capacity has to expand very quickly and then it shrinks. And it's difficult to do that. We couldn't do it without the community support, the number of volunteers that step forward. And we haven't heard that much in terms of the Kosovar, or the Operation Parasol, around that particular issue. And I really have to say that the Albanian community did step up. And we were responsible, we being Costi here in Toronto, for recruiting interpreters for Camp Gordon and Trenton. And we were shocked, really, and pleasantly surprised to see how easy that was, because there was a large Albanian community in the GTA, and we had volunteers from Hamilton to Oshawa that came forward, and we sent them to the bases to do the interpretation. So, you know, that the volunteer support is a big element of our work as settlement workers. So those were the two comments I wanted to make.
You guys want to respond to that or?
Yeah, I think just to echo that every large humanitarian movement I've been working on with, there's a moment, I define it as drinking from a fire hydrant. The intensity of the community support, volunteers, I mean, is if you've ever been in the receiving line of a fire hydrant, the water volume is quite strong. And during these times when you've got political leadership, media, civil society, all on the same page, laser focused on this humanitarian movement, it is incredible what you can accomplish together. It brings out the best of Canada. You know, to be a little controversial, could Operation Parasol happen in 2024? I don't know. I mean, we went through Operation Syrian Refugee, a large, primarily Muslim community. Operation Parasol was our, you know, significant Muslim community. But given the fractured nature of where we're at now, I wonder if we could pull this off, if it, you know, if it would align, given the tensions now that we're living through day in and day out, working directly with newcomers to Canada. It's just something that I sometimes think about in the context of looking back 25 years and now we're in 2024.
Yeah, okay. Let's ask a question if there's any question. Yeah, I think there's a question. I'll make some comment.
Mike Ward,
Mike.
I was impressed with the scope and scale of the organizations you described to deal with the surge flows of refugees that we've seen in the past 30 to 40 years. And I have a question in terms of how it actually works, in terms of how that network interrelates. And it spawns from a relationship I've got in Ottawa with the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, which houses homeless families and individuals, including homeless veterans. But as I looked at the map that you presented, many of those areas were really faith-based refugee movements. And I'm wondering if what you describe is in place in Canada. Is it faith-based or is it independent of faith? And it's really just refugee-based. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, the comparison between faith-based or sector.
I would say, with the again, these are my really in-depth. I'm not saying it. I can actually describe, bring you argue about that. Refugee actually support is a Canadian DNA. This is what it is. Yes, we get in the media here and there, but look at this. Canada, government of Canada brings 15,000 people to Canada as a government-sponsored refugee. About 26,000 coming as a private sponsored. And that is limited. If the government of Canada increases that 50,000, that would be no problem. You got enough people to do that. With the support we get, I mean, I really feel it because just with the Afghan refugees, I mean, just recent one, we got over $4 or $5 million from cooperation that they gave us money. And there was so much support that we didn't know what to do with this support. So it is there. Now, again, goes back to obviously media is important, the political situation is important, we all know that. But again, there's a difference between resettlement on a regular basis, which is happening and nobody know about it, and the mass resettlement. But the last thing I want to say, also, you need to remember, we are getting a good deal out of it. We got 45,000 Afghan, because they are recent, and I'm just referring to them a little bit more than others. 56% of them are under age of 18. The human capital, even I was talking to a group of really right-wing in Alberta, and I tried to make a business case, the human capital that we brought into Canada, this is amazing. 28,000 people, they would never forget the kindness Canadian. They're going to be the best Canadian citizen. They might be a bit different. They may do things a bit different in the beginning, but they're going to integrate. And I think, yes, we are doing humanitarian work, but trust me, we are also bringing good people. And again, like yourself, like, you know, people sitting here, like, you know, this gentleman or sister, or we heard from people. So when we say refugee, doesn't mean, I mean, I came as a refugee. Me and my wife, we hold 3 degrees. So we were contributing from day one into this country. So because refugees in Canada has done well, and I don't see any changes in the future in respect to number of refugees coming to Canada. I really don't see that because they also got community support. Got some faith bases. They're already got out of 136 organizations that they do sponsorship. Obviously, 80%, including organization that I work for, Calgary Catholic Immigration, is a faith base. But we actually have more people. I got 3,000 applications sitting in our office. And the quota that the government gives us is only 200. So if they give us 2,000 quota, 2,000 spot, I have no problem filling out, and it is paid by community. People are paying for the first year support of that. So I think seeing those, I think is going to continue, and I think is going to get better.
I want to make a point that I missed in my, because I got the hook. During these massive humanitarian resettlement movements, one of the things that the sector is challenged with when the focus is just on one population, and we're continuing to get other refugees throughout this whole time, is the issue of equity and racism. And that's something we haven't really talked about. Again, so I'm going to be a little controversial. You know, the fact that Canada welcomed close to 300,000 Ukrainians on a temporary resident visa, and what we heard and were reminded, you know, last night by Mr. Axworthy, you know, what is happening in Sudan, what's happening in Myanmar. You know, I guess it's a moment we have to reflect internally now. I had the honor of co-chairing and designing Canada's post-arrival phase for the Ukrainians under QET visas, which ended up being 300,000. The policy, you know, government was saying 50,000 plus or minus. We got 300,000. Visas were approved upwards of just over close to 1 million people had applied for a temporary resident visa in this country. But this was one of the challenges within the sector, within us, you know, as these corporate donations were coming in, I only want to give it to the Ukrainian or to the Afghan. And as a organization, we were seeing refugees from multiple different source countries and trying to work through to ensure that we were equitable in our support in redirecting or helping to redirect the Canadian public's interest in this donation. So this is something, again, I wanted to mention, because this is something that we grapple with when the focus is just on one movement and we are getting refugees from others, you know, and so, yeah, so here we are, you know, 40,000 Afghans, 300,000 temporary residents. But in reality, again, my own personal opinion, not a well thought through government policy. We have 300,000 Ukrainians, and many are not intending, from what we're hearing on the ground, are not intending to return to Ukraine. And what's happening now, their visas are coming up for renewal. The embassy will not renew those visas. They can't then apply for the extension of their 3-year open work permit. It's going to come to a crisis within last week's level announcement. These are the complexity of the challenges that the settlement sector works through. And in the case of Ukrainians now, we are communicating now that they're no longer eligible for federal supports as of the end of March. So they have to leave the language programming, supports, employment, because they're no longer eligible. And again, it's these fractured political decisions and disconnected policy that makes our work as Canada's settlement sector very difficult when we're working day in and day out every day with real people.
I'd like to make a comment before the question. I think we heard about the cost, and that is something comes time to time that we spend 150 million. I just wanted to tell you, we are living in a world that we don't ask about how much it costs to bomb somewhere, but we definitely ask question, how much it costs to bring people, refugees to this country. I give you a number and I stop and I listen to the question. One F-15 costs $100 million, $100 million to buy one F-15. They are designed to operate for 200 hours, 20,000 hours. Each hours of F-15 operating, it costs $30,000. To be accurate, it's $29,000, but let's say $30,000. That is $600 million plus $100 million to buy one. That is $700 million the cost of one plane that drops bomb. And we're not that concerned about it. We want to buy 50, we say let's buy 100. But when you spend some money to bring people, save their life to this country and make them a citizen of this country, some group have some concern. And that's what I always use that as a number. And then they say, okay, it's cheaper to bring people rather than to bomb them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Albana Staffa. I had a story that was kind of in my mind as we were speaking, and then the comment about resettlement in Peterborough made me want to speak because we are from Peterborough, Albanians from Peterborough, and my first big girl job was at an NGO called the New Canadian Centre, which was heavily funded during the Syrian refugee crisis. And the reason why that was so important to me is I feel like the Syrian refugee crisis really informed my political compass. I was 17 years old. I couldn't vote for Justin Trudeau yet, but I was rallying for him. Me and my sister, as soon as we heard that the refugees were coming, we joined tutoring programs at this very same agency that our family went to. And during that first job, it felt like such a success. And it definitely was. So we would hear new families coming on the weekend, and the rest of the student workers would go to No Frills and buy chickpeas and make sure that they were in the cabinets for everybody to be there. And again, we saw those peers of ours that we tutored graduate now from college programs, from university programs. And there was a little girl that I became very attached to. Her name was Amar. And when she came, she didn't know any English. She's this beautiful little girl with big brown eyes and curly hair. And I worked there 3 consecutive summers. The next summer, Amar was fully fluent in English, as children are, right? And she was so excited. She was running around the office and hugging us. And again, it felt like such a victory, and it was. And I saw her mother just kind of be behind her. And she was looking. She also had very big, brown, beautiful eyes, and she hadn't learned English yet. And in that moment, I felt, how can we extend this victory as we do to children, as it's so easy for young people to kind of be this image of success in Canada? How can we help adults that may be lingering, that may not necessarily right away be going into institutions like the workforce or like school? It made me think of some of my aunties that may have lingered. And so again, I don't know if this is a question or a statement, or just if you had a comment on, again, how can we kind of take those victories and extend it perhaps to adults specifically that may sort of slip through the cracks of some of these programs?
Yeah. We've come a long way in 25 years. We have gender-specific programming now, right? We have children and youth programming, women's programming, and I think we've learned a lot that not only does one size not fit every ethnocultural community, but that every member of the family brings their unique migration experience. And so as service providers, we have responded in very different ways than 25 years ago to really specialize, tailor that support. I mentioned briefly in my opening remarks around the settlement case management program. Again, was not around 25 years. The fact that we're working with families, at-risk families for, more focus for up to 18 months. And so, this is Canada and our work does not have a start and an end. This is about nation building. This is about social cohesion. And we that have been around for, working in this area for over 3 decades, we're constantly learning, listening, implementing, taking risks, doing pilots, because it is a gigantic all of Canada project, experiment. And that's, I think, for me, the greatest thing of having the opportunity to look back now 25 years and to understand how far we've come as a country in our response to subsequent humanitarian movements. Have we got it all sorted out? Heck no. But we are continuing to make progress and improvements, every day on how we can better welcome and build more inclusive communities. And that's the kind of the vision and the nature and the I think the passion that we bring to this work. Yeah.
If I could add, I came as the government-sponsored refugee. At that time, we didn't even have a video VCR showing how to do banking. Going back to how sophisticated things are becoming, the world has changed. One of the things you mentioned is really, it goes back to the notion of managing expectation. You see, people, when they come to Canada, obviously expectation is high, right? Even Afghan refugees, when they came in, they were surprised that they have to go in 2-bedroom apartment because they had a big house, big yard. So these are learning. Managing the government expectation, managing the public expectation, and managing the professional expectation. So there are 3 different expectations we have to manage. But definitely, I always say that there's a science behind, it's not only refugee resettlement, immigration, global movement. We are bringing people, refugees are only 5-6% of the total immigration to Canada. So Canada really needs to do a better job in integrating people, because otherwise we will be some other country, they have really problem with immigration, right? But in Canada, we have a good story. And I think, as was said, there is a willingness by everybody, by government, by public, by practitioner, to do a better job. The partnership we have in Canada does not exist anywhere. Honestly, it does not. So that's a good news. But we all have to do a better job a little bit. We can't stop to do a better job, because I'm concerned if Canada one day say, we're sick and tired of refugee, we don't want to spend, I will be a very sad person. So I don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, I have a question for the panel. Sorry, I know you wanted to finish early, but
I didn't, for the record, never said that.
okay.
Don't get us started.
A lot of sectors of our economy have been struggling with finding qualified workers, and working in the settlement work from what I remember is very fulfilling and satisfying, but at the same time is very stressful, and the mental health of professionals was touched on earlier on from citizenship and immigration officials that spoke earlier. from my own experience. I can share one anecdote. One day after work, we decided, as you do with your colleagues, to go and see a movie. There was a blockbuster with Angelina Jolie, and we went inside and we came out all very somber, very sad, and said, we need to go and have a drink now, because it was that movie Beyond Border that was entirely refugee-based. And it was kind of a realization how we were all affected by the work. So question is about mental health. Has anything improved in the past 25 years for your workforce? And also, are you able to hire the people that you need?
Well, you go ahead. You're older than me. He's not.
Yeah, this is a real issue, the whole notion of vicarious trauma. So going back to Stefan's comment about how he was attached to this one child, well, that child ended up in Vancouver with us. And he was one of the people that was supporting that family that had been through horrific massacre, losing so many family members. We're getting a lot better. The whole issue of self-care and Fariborz, I believe, was very involved in a recent work around better understanding the mental health, mental well-being of those frontline workers that are working in Canada's resettlement assistance program. And I think that we've learned a lot, and we're continuing to put in place debriefings. We've got counselors and psychologists that will come and do structured debriefing. There's a number of ways in which we're trying to tackle this, in addition to the improvement in overall sector benefits and employee assistance programs and so forth. But this is an ongoing issue because, we see it, we can see it on the TV 24/7. But when individuals arrive in tremendous distress, the frontline workers, those that are working and providing services in the first language, have the most complex and difficult job of anyone in our sector, I believe.
Yeah, I think, you see, first of all, when we say mental health, refugees, they don't have mental health. They have trauma. Untreated trauma leads to mental health. So that's why I emphasize on a good initial resettlement. Because if people come in, they have a program that IRCC funds that we actually identify, train volunteer from the city, from our local, to become host volunteer, friends with these people, which is a fantastic program. So as I said in the beginning, we have to do a better job. What it means is when people come in, and Chris said, we have educated ourselves better. So most of the program, trauma-informed, basically, approach we have, which is very, very good. But the key is to engage these people, get them out, not isolated. I mean, the one that sit home, they're going to be obviously difficult. So how we manage that is important. Not that they come in. If we manage them, we get them engaged in the community, support them initially, then I think we're going to avoid a lot of trauma become a mental health problem. So I think we have experience of Yazidis. We don't have time for that, but Yazidis came to this country. We brought about 2,000 Yazidis. I mean, you can't imagine what happened to these families. You cannot. I mean, I went through a lot myself, but I always say it is just, if you want to really compare, it's only Holocaust I can compare it with, because we had family coming in, a woman, 3 sisters came in, that they were sold in the market 20 times as a sex slave. I had a woman coming with 2 kids, and she had actually have 5 kids and a husband. Husband was killed, and 3 kids was taken by Daesh, and she and 2 kids. And we managed them well. I mean, you should see them today after 5 years. So again, we got gaps, mental health gaps everywhere, but I think with the newcomers, especially refugees, the trauma is not the mental health. We need to treat them right. Now, as far as the number goes, if you look at Canada faces huge labor shortage. That's the reality. I mean, I know some people like immigration, some people don't like immigration. But the reality is that we have, as we speak, last year, we have 200,000 short in the labor. 200,000. The projection is by year 2030, which is about 5 years down the road, it will go over 600,000. So these are the reality we are living with. Whether we love immigration or not, doesn't matter. The reality is Canada has to bring people to this country. How we manage, how we settle them, that is the key question. The question of bringing them is a must, doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, they reduced the numbers, which was a good idea, I think. They can increase it later on. But the reality that immigration and also immigration to Canada is the biggest business Canada is actually involved with. Huge human capital, huge actual capital coming to this country, which we don't talk about it. We only talk about the challenge that maybe newcomers have or create for the community.
Thank you. Such a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to have this conversation with so much wisdom in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.